Hi, I'm Robin Warder from The Trail When Cold. If you are unfamiliar with my other podcast, I often cover stories from the television show Unsolved Mysteries. For the past 5 years, you've heard me talk about these cases on my own, but now's your chance to hear me have in-depth discussions about them with other people. I want to welcome you to my new project, The Path Went Chilly, where I will be discussing in depth with my two good friends and co-hosts cases that I've covered on The Trail When Cold. Meet my co-hosts. First one up is Jules.
Hi, I'm Jules from the podcast Riddle Me That True Crime, and I have a PhD in transpersonal counseling. I'm not a psychologist or a diagnostician, so don't get too excited. But I can't wait to analyze these cases with these two amazing humans. You've already met Robin, now meet Dr. Ashley Wellman.
Hi, I'm Ashley. I have a PhD in criminology, law, and society, and I specialize in trauma victims and survivors. I've spent a great deal of time working with families left behind after homicides with a cold case unit based out of Florida, and I'm also a professor of criminology. I'm so excited to be chatting with two of my best friends about the cases that everyone can't seem to get enough of.
We hope in doing so that we will have a clearer perspective of what may have transpired. Oftentimes, Ashley will be totally in the dark.
Jules and I will be telling Ashley a story she may not know much about, so all of her reactions are genuine.
We will be releasing on all major platforms April 8th.
We hope you will join us as we attempt to heat up some ice-cold cases.
The Path Went Chilly will be available every Thursday on all major podcast platforms.
Hi, I'm Laura.
And I'm Joe.
And this is Crime Divers.
Everybody, welcome back.
Hello.
So today we are going to do a lot-o-sode.
We are.
I was going to read out a review and I don't know where my phone is.
It's here.
Oh, okay.
Do you want it?
Yes, I just remembered. So I'll read out a wee review. Okay. Right.
We should really be prepared, shouldn't we?
I know, sorry. Right.
Are you ready?
Yeah. So much yes.
Okay.
Love this true crime podcast. They do a great job telling us the stories of these horrifying cases. Would recommend to anyone looking for more true crime in their life. Keep up the great work. Kenzie and Amy from Sheer Crime Podcast.
Cool.
Yeah, they're actually a really good podcast. I listen to them, and I just noticed earlier on their latest episode came up on my phone, and they're discussing that documentary, you know, that really unbelievable one.
The one that you got me to watch.
Yeah, what's it called again?
Oh, I don't know, but was she the family friend man that...
Yeah, that's going to annoy me. Wait now, let me go on to it.
Yeah, I know what you mean though.
A sheer crime. Abducted in plain sight.
Yeah.
So, it's part 1, so I'll need to wait till
that is
part
still
2.
an unbelievable one.
That is an unbelievable one, so I'm really looking forward to listening to their podcast on that, so...
Well, thank you very much for your review.
Yeah, thanks for your review. So, Laura?
Yes. Well, guess what?
Oh, what?
Well, this is, Well, remember how I did like the Greenbrier roast? Greenbrier?
The Greenbrier roast!
The Greenbrier ghost story.
Oh, yeah. Is this the second instalment?
This is ghost related, I shall say, because I wouldn't call it a ghost story. Because the crime itself is not ghostly, but there is a ghost related part of it at the end.
Okay.
Because, to be honest, I find it quite hard to find the ghost stories. You set me a challenge. It's not been easy. So, there is definitely some...
What's wrong with a challenge?
Well, this is true. So, I do have the second instalment of my ghost stories. But, obviously, the crime itself is not ghostly.
Right. Okay, so, what is the name of your episode?
This is called the Villisca Axe Murders. I think that's how you pronounce it. Or Villisca. I'm not sure.
Villisca?
Villisca, maybe? Villisca. We'll go Villisca. The Villisca Axe Murders.
Right, and where in the world are we? Because I'm assuming we're in Villisca.
Yes, that is.
I don't know where that is.
That's the town, but it's...
It sounds like Italian or something.
It doesn't it? But it's actually in Iowa.
Ah.
In the US of A.
Oh, okay.
So
that was a bit unexpected. I actually thought it was going to be like Italy or something.
No, we're in America, in Iowa.
Okay, so shall we dive in?
Let's dive in. So this is another old story for you today. This crime takes place on the 9th/10th of June in 1912.
Well, most of the ghost stories probably are going to be old ones,
they
aren't they?
Yeah. So this is another one, yeah. So let's say that it was in Villisca, Iowa, USA. This crime actually involves the Moore family, which consisted of parents Josiah, he was 43, and Sarah, aged 39. They had 4 children together, which they were called Herman Montgomery, aged 11, Mary Catherine, aged 10, Arthur Boyd, aged 7, and Paul Vernon, aged 5. They all had very random middle names, but that's how it was.
Okay.
So there you go. That was the Moore family. They were well known and well liked in their community. Life was fairly normal for the family. They were just a normal family, they were close family. They just did normal sort of family things. There was nothing special about them. They were just well liked and well known in their community. So Mary Catherine had asked her mum and dad if 2 of her friends could come for a sleepover one night. They said yes. So Mary Catherine invited her 2 friends, which were Ina May, who was aged 8, and Lena Gertrude, and they were actually sisters.
Does everybody just go by their first and middle name?
Yeah, that's weird. When I was writing it down, I was like, did I write this? I'm like, but that's their names. That's how they were put across. So I thought, I can't just...
Yeah. Well, some people do go by their first and middle names, but it just seems weird that they're all going by that.
Yeah, so it was Ina May and Lena Gertrude.
So they were sisters.
Stillinger, their surnames were.
Right.
So they were sisters. So they had been invited to spend the night on the 9th of June. So that evening, the Moore family and the 2 girls attended their local church, where they participated in the Children's Day programme, which Sarah had organised. So they were quite well known in their church community, because back in those days, church was always quite a big thing for it. And
some places.
Some places. Well, after the programme finished at 9:30, the Moores and the girls walked home, arriving home between about 9:45 and 10 p.m. So that was that. So at 7 a.m. the next day, Mary Peckham, who was the Moore's neighbour, she became concerned after she noticed that the family had not come out to do the morning chores. And I was laughing at myself as I was writing this, because I was like, at 7 a.m, she's noticed that they've not come out to do the morning chores. I mean, who on earth comes out to do morning chores at 7 a.m. or before 7 a.m?
Well, it depends what... They might have chickens to feed or something.
Well, funny you say that, because there's chickens. But I just was like... I just
think, what a nosy neighbour to notice at 7 o'clock
well,
in the morning.
because that's what I'm thinking. I mean, at 7 a.m, I'm not looking at what my neighbours are doing. I mean, I know this is a totally...
I'm still asleep at that time in the morning.
Exactly. I mean, I know this is a totally different time, world, place, whatever, but, I mean, to be out any earlier than that, I mean, bugger that.
Yeah, but obviously that must be the routine. For her to notice that they're not out, then that must be the routine that they do come out and do the chores at that time.
And let's say, I mean, this was like 1912, so in those days, clearly that was...
They got up early.
They go
out to bed early because they had nothing else to do, so that's why they got up early.
Oh no, but that night, supposedly they didn't arrive home till between 2:45 and 10 o'clock, so I wouldn't say that was that early for them to be up again that morning. So as I say, it must have been like a consistent routine for the neighbour to become quite concerned early on, because that must have been something they did every day.
Yeah.
And it just shows you how different times are for now, because I have. Here's me writing again. It just shows you how different times are now, because I'd have no idea whether anything would have happened to my neighbours just by that.
No.
So anyway, Mary Peckham, she had knocked on the Moore's door, but when nobody answered, she tried to open the door, but it was locked. She then let the Moore's chickens out.
How did I know those chickens? That's so weird.
Yeah, because I put in brackets, that must have been one of the chores.
Yeah.
She then called Josiah's brother, Ross Moore. He arrived, and he tried knocking and shouting for them, but there was no response at the door at all. So luckily, Ross had a spare key, so he let himself in. Mary she stayed on the porch while Ross headed inside. Ross went into the parlour and they opened up the guest bedroom door first. He came across Ina and Lena's bodies on the bed. Ross then shouted to Mary, "Call Henry Hank Horton," who was the town's police officer, because like back in those days.
So he didn't just say call Henry or call. Like, you actually called him by his full name?
Henry, well, it was Henry, and then he's obviously in inverted commas Hank Horton, so maybe they just called him Hank Horton, but I don't know. But as I said, back in those days, they wouldn't have had the 911 calls, so it was just a case of the local police officer or whatever. So he was called, and he arrived shortly afterwards, and he searched the house and found the entire Moore family and the 2 Stillinger girls had been bludgeoned to death. The murder weapon was an axe, which belonged to Josiah. That was found in the guest bedroom, alongside Ina and Lena's bodies. So they were all murdered, basically.
So they got murdered with his own axe?
With his axe, yeah, that was the murder weapon. So the doctors determined that the murders had taken place sometime between midnight and 5 a.m. They found 2 recently smoked cigarette ends in the attic, which suggested that the killer or killers, because at this point they didn't know, patiently waited in the attic until everyone was asleep. So they reckon that this person or persons was actually potentially in the house.
That's creepy.
Sort of, waiting for him to come home, which is a bit scary. It makes me want to go and check my loft, make sure there's nobody up there.
I ain't going to check my loft.
Probably wouldn't even get in your loft.
Up there.
I was going to say, probably wouldn't even get in your loft, it's probably that full.
Was it?
Yeah.
They plenty to
do. So basically the killer or killers would have been patiently waiting until everybody was asleep. The attack, they say, started in the master bedroom where Josiah and Sarah were sleeping. Josiah received more blows from the axe than any of the others. His face had been cut so badly that his eyes were missing.
Oh.
So that's what I was kind of thinking. I was like, well, did that mean that
it was mainly focused on him?
Focused on him, or was it just because he was like
the
a man?
One and harder to kill, maybe?
Yeah, maybe, I don't really know, but he was apparently the worst, attacked. So the killer... What?
The worst injured.
Injured. Well, I don't know how to put that, but yeah. He came off the worst, shall we say. I mean, they all came off worse because they died, but I suppose injury-wise, he came off the worst. So the killer or killers used the blade of the axe on Josiah, while they used the blunt end on the rest of the victims as well. So he got...
Is there a reason for that?
No, there doesn't seem to be a reason for it. I didn't, in fact, come across a reason for it. But
just wondered.
For whatever reason, he got the full blade of it, and they got the other side of it. But I don't really know why. Which is probably why he did come off the worst, I guess. So Herman, Mary, Arthur and Paul were next. They were bludgeoned in the head in the same way as their parents.
Oh.
No, it's a shame. Afterwards, the killer returned to Josiah. I don't know how they determined this, though, because it said that afterwards that the killer returned to Josiah and Sarah to inflict more blows on them. Obviously, there was a bit of sort of stuff lying around, so they knocked over a shoe that was filled with blood. And then they went... So I don't know if that made them realise that they'd come back to the room, maybe.
There must have been some reason.
Because I suppose they would have been hit, there must have been blood, they went away, killed, come back, and if they've knocked over the shoe that was filled with blood, maybe that's how they've determined that they'd come back again. But I was like, how did they know that?
I know, yeah.
But it doesn't really explain it any more than that. That is basically what was said.
Well, they obviously had a reason if that's...
Yeah.
They've came to that conclusion.
Exactly. It's then thought that the killer or killers went to the guest bedroom, and that's where they killed Ina and Lena.
Yeah. That's quite funny.
I know.
That they were called rhyming names.
I know, because I was like, when I was writing that, I was like, Ina and Lena. Like,
can you imagine, like, if you were one of those kids and your parents shouting on you and you'd be like, what did they say? Was that mine or was that my sister's? Like...
Yeah, I get it. Oh, very, 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 two similar names, I think.
Yeah.
I don't... Never mind. So investigators believed that all of the victims, except for Lena, had been asleep when murdered. They thought that she was awake and tried to fight back, as she was found lying across the bed with a defensive wound on her arm. So they think that she was
just
a bit
put
awake.
her arms up to try and defend herself.
Exactly. Lena's nightie was also pushed up to her waist and wearing no underwear, which led investigators to believe that she may have been sexually molested, or at least tried to.
Right. Oh.
I know. It's the same. So she must have obviously seen the full horror of what was about to happen to her, I guess, which would have been
What a shame.
horrible. I mean, not that it makes it any nicer, but if the others were asleep, at least they might not have
They wouldn't have known.
been aware of it
Yeah.
too much. But to actually have that, I mean, that must have been quite scary. Over time, obviously, there were several suspects to be questioned over the murders. So I'm just going to tell you the names and a bit about like their story of how they've become involved in this. So there was a man named Andrew Sawyer. So basically, anyone that was a stranger in the community was automatically a suspect, because and back in those days, I think the community is like you kind of knew everybody.
Yeah.
And
I've seen that in older cases. Like if anybody was acting strange or suspicious, or like a stranger, like
So basically, he was a stranger to the community. He wasn't from there. So he became a suspect. So there was no actual real evidence to link him to the crime, but his name came up quite often in like criminal sort of proceedings. So I think he was like in trouble for other bits and pieces, and his name had came up around. So he was obviously known maybe to the law a bit. So his name came up. So according to a man named Thomas Dyer, he was a bridge foreman and a pile driver for the Burlington Railroad. Sawyer apparently approached him and his crew in a place called Creston at 6 a.m. on the morning of the murders, the morning that they were discovered. Sawyer was clean shaven, he was wearing a brown suit when he arrived, but his shoes were covered in mud and his trousers were wet nearly up to his knees. He asked for a job, and as Dyer, he needed an extra man. Sawyer was actually just given a job on the spot. So Dyer later testified that later that evening, when the crew reached a place called Fontanelle in Iowa, Sawyer bought himself a newspaper, and he went off by himself to read it. The front page was basically splashed about the murders because they were known at this time, so the front papers had all the whatever details they had at that point. And according to Dyer, Sawyer was like very interested in it. The crew complained that Sawyer slept with his clothes on and that he was eager to be by himself. They were also uneasy that he slept with an axe next to him, and he often he often talked about the Villisca murders and whether or not a killer had been arrested. So he'd obviously shown quite an interest in it. So
sounds a bit dodgy.
They were getting a bit suspicious of him, I think.
Yeah.
He also reportedly told Dyer that he had been in Villisca that Sunday night and had heard of the murders. Afraid he would have become a suspect, he had left and gone to Creston, which is where he met them to ask him his job. Dyer was suspicious, so he basically turned him into the sheriff. And then Dyer later testified that before the sheriff arrived, he had actually walked up behind Sawyer when he suddenly jumped up and said to himself, I will cut your goddamn heads off. And at the same time, he made like a striking motion with the axe and began hitting stuff in front of him. So he didn't realise that this guy Dyer was behind him. So it was like to himself. It was like he jumped up and was like, I'm going to cut your heads off. And then he's like making the motions, so as if he was, I don't know what he was doing.
Enacting something.
Well, yeah, basically. So a bit strange and a bit scary.
Well, if somebody was waving a flipping axe I'd be a bit scared.
Well, I know, especially to kind of no one. Like, just to himself. He was just...
Yeah.
He obviously thought he was alone and I don't know what he was doing, but it seems a bit strange anyway. So Dyers' son, he also testified as well that one day as the crew drove through Villisca, Sawyer told him that he would show him the man who murdered the He would show him how the man who murdered the Moore family got out of town. He said the man that did the job jumped over a manure box, which he pointed out, and then showed where he crossed the railroad track. Dyers' son said there were actual footprints in the soggy ground, and he also told him that there was an old tree where the murderer stepped into the creek, and Dyers' son looked over and he did see an old tree where the man had described it.
Oh, okay.
Sawyer was actually dismissed as a suspect though, when officials learned that he could actually prove he had been in Osceola in Iowa, it's another town, on the night of the murders, because apparently he'd been arrested for something else.
So how did they know about that stuff then?
Well,
okay, right. Shut up, Jill.
Yeah, and the sheriff recalled putting him on a train to send him away at 11 p.m. that evening, so supposedly the sheriff...
So it couldn't have been him then?
Well, that's what basically they said, so I don't really know what exactly, like I don't know if he was just making it up or if he just... There was, I mean, he wasn't arrested.
It wasn't him.
No, it wasn't him.
But how was he pointing this stuff out and evidence was there? Like,
unless it was just by total fluke, I mean, or maybe he had read it, but there was nothing to suggest that it was actually him. So
I'm just looking at your handwritten notes, and I'm just wondering why there's a love heart at the bottom. There's like 3/4 of the page down, there's a massive big love heart on it.
Well, see, that's what happens when you have a 5-year-old who decides to draw on your book.
Oh, she was sending you some love.
I know. Well, it is it's Easter holidays here at the moment, so I was trying to get a bit of this done because she's off school, and she was with me, and she was like, "Mummy, can I draw on your book?" And I'm like, "No," and then of course
she went and did it.
She went and did it anyway. So, but then she's like, "Oh, you can just write over it." That's what she said to me, and I was like, "No, I can't just write over it because I don't want." Well, I can't even read my own writing anyway, but
maybe she wants to help with the podcast.
Well, maybe. But Love Hearts is not really appropriate for a true crime podcast.
No, but that's really cute though. And do you know what else is really cute? Obviously you know, but I'm telling the listeners that, you know, obviously she's my niece. Mm-hmm. So she brought me an Easter present and she'd made me a bookmark. And so she and a card. So then she gave me the bookmark and she was like, I just thought that you could maybe use that when you're doing your podcast. And I was like, oh, how cute. It's just like if you read a book or something, you know, for the podcast and you can use the bookmark. I was like, see, she cares about the podcast.
Well, she didn't give me a blooming bookmark.
Well, she told what did she tell? She told me, she said that I'm more fun than you, so.
Yeah, well, that's true.
So I got the bookmarks from you.
Well, she must love me though.
Of course she loves you.
Anyway, let's get back to the seriousness of the case.
Well, I couldn't help it. There's a big love heart on your notes, so I had to ask.
Unfortunately, but never mind. So anyway, the next suspect was a man called Reverend George Kelly. He was an English-born travelling minister, so he was actually in town on the night of the murders because he was there at the church that they go to.
Yeah.
He was described as peculiar. Apparently, he'd suffered a mental breakdown as a child, and as an adult, he had been accused of being a peeping Tom.
Oh, okay. So, a pair, basically.
Basically, yeah. So on June the 8th, 1912, he came to Villisca to teach at the Children's Day services which the Moore family attended. So apparently he left town between 5 a.m. and 5:30 a.m. on the 10th of June, which is hours before the bodies were discovered. Kelly actually had confessed to the murders in court, but the jury didn't believe his confessions. So he said that he did this,
right?
But the jury didn't actually believe him.
Well, it couldn't have been a very convincing confession then.
No. But in the weeks that followed, he displayed a fascination with the case, and he wrote many letters to the police and the family of the victims. This obviously aroused suspicion, and a private investigator wrote back to Kelly asking him for details that he might know about the murders, that only a murderer would probably know.
Yeah.
So apparently Kelly replied with great detail. He claimed to have heard sounds and possibly witnessed the murders though. So his known mental illness made authorities question whether he actually knew the details of the murder because he'd committed it or he was just imagining his account of it.
Right.
But in 1914, which was 2 years after the murders, Kelly was arrested for sending obscene material through the mail.
And this is the Reverend?
Yeah, this is the Reverend George Kelly, yeah. Yeah, so he was 2 years later he was arrested for something else, which he was sending obscene material through the mail. He was sent to St Elizabeth's Hospital, which was the National Mental Hospital in Washington DC, and investigators speculated again that Kelly could have been the murderer of the Moore family. So, again in 1917, Kelly was arrested for the Villisca murders. The police actually obtained a confession from him. However, it followed he'd been interrogated for hours upon hours before he made this confession.
Uh-huh.
So I think maybe it was done under a bit of duress. Maybe he was kind of, because he would obviously been interrogated for that long, he'd maybe been sort of forced at confessing. So apparently after that, Kelly actually later took back his confession, but after 2 separate trials, he was actually acquitted. So he was never actually found guilty of doing the murders or not. I mean, it's
okay.
I think he was just a bit crazy about the sound.
Yes.
I mean, I don't think that.
Okay, sorry, we got interrupted. I don't know if you maybe heard the door, but my husband walked in not realising that we were recording. So I apologise, Laura, for the interruption. And
That's all right. That's all
back
right.
to our regular... What is it? Let's get back to our regular scheduled programme.
Program. Okay, right.
Did they not say that on the TV and
I
stuff?
have no idea what they say on the TV about that, but maybe. So I was just finished telling you that Reverend George Kelly had been acquitted after 2 separate trials.
Right.
So he wasn't found guilty
Right.
of the murders.
Okay.
So that brings us on to Frank Fernando Jones. He was a Villisca resident and an Iowa state senator. Josiah had worked at his store for many years before leaving to open his own store.
Right.
Josiah apparently took business away from him, so Jones obviously
So
wasn't
he had a grudge.
Yeah, because he took his business away from him, including a very successful John Deere dealership. He had John Deere, it's like the tractors and farm kind of
Yeah, I've
machinery and
heard,
stuff. Yeah. So apparently Josiah was rumoured to also have had a sexual affair with Jones's daughter-in-law through, though there was no evidence to actually support that. So I don't actually know 100%, but that was rumoured to have been the case. So there wasn't really, there's a wee bit more about him, but that was just, he was linked to it, but there was nothing else really to say on him.
Okay.
Apart from the next guy that I'm going to tell you about, I've connected to him a little bit. So he's called William Mansfield. So another theory was that Jones had hired William Blackie Mansfield. I don't know why they all have these bloody random names. So apparently they say that Jones had hired him to murder the Moore family. It is believed that Mansfield was a serial killer because he murdered his wife and child and in-laws with an axe 2 years after the Villisca murders.
With an axe?
Mm-hmm. So he is also believed to have committed the axe murder, or I can't speak. He's also believed to have committed axe murders that happened in Piola in Kansas, which was 4 days before the Villisca murders as well. And he was also suspected in the double homicide of a Jenny Peterson and a Jenny Miller in Illinois. So each crime location was accessible by train, and all the murders were carried out in virtually the same way. So that's why they think that he might have been connected to that. But Mansfield was released from from custody after his alibi actually checked out. Payroll records had said that he was actually in Illinois at the time of the murders. However, a restaurant owner actually identified Mansfield as the man he saw the morning after the Villisca murders, boarding the train. But if proven to be true, it would have discredited Mansfield's actual alibi about him being in Illinois.
Huh.
But again, nothing more came of that.
Oh, okay.
So he wasn't charged with the murder either.
Are we actually going to find out who did it?
Well, maybe not.
Oh no, didn't tell me it's unsolved.
Well, we'll keep going, will we? So the next suspect was a man called Henry Lee Moore. He, again, was a suspected serial killer. Not related to the Moore family, though, because his name's Moore. But he wasn't related to the Moore family. He was actually convicted of the murder of his mother and grandmother several months after the murders in Villisca. His weapon of choice had also been an axe.
Did everybody just walk about with axes?
Well, in 1912, maybe there wasn't many other weapons. I don't know what kind of weapons they would have had back then, but clearly they had
guns.
Yeah, but again,
knives.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, but no, they liked the axe. But no, he was not convicted.
Right.
So then there was a man called Sam Moyer. At the inquest of the murder, it was reported that Sam Moyer, he was actually Josiah's brother-in-law, often threatened to kill Josiah.
Nice.
However, Moyer's alibi cleared him of the crime.
Right.
So he wasn't convicted.
We've had quite a few suspects then.
I know. I think we've only got one more. So one more suspect, which was a man called Paul Mueller. In 2017, there was actually a book released by a man called Bill James and his daughter Rachel McCarthy called The Man from the Train. And in that, they discussed the Villisca murders. They think that this man, Paul Mueller, was actually the murderer. He was an immigrant, possibly from Germany. And he was actually the subject of a year-long manhunt, which was unsuccessful.
Oh.
As he was the sole suspect in the murder of another family. who had employed him as a farmhand. So they actually think that this guy Muller went on a killing spree, which included the Moore family.
Right.
But again, that...
We're not going to find out who killed this family, are we?
No, so that is all the suspects. And sadly, to this day, the crime does remain unsolved.
Oh, for God's sake!
So nobody was actually ever charged of the murders. I mean...
They had a good few suspects
There
as well,
was a few suspects there that it could have been. I mean, the Reverend one is the most interesting one I found.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, he obviously did confess to it, but...
But he seemed to have, you know, sort of mental...
Yeah, he had, like, mental issues, so I'm not
yeah.
sure whether his... You know, that was real or he was imagining it or whatever. But, no, sadly, nobody was ever convicted of the murders, so we have no idea. But... Obviously, you'll all be wondering. I know you'll all be wondering why I've classed it as a ghost story, but I came across that actually the Moore's home is actually now considered one of the most haunted houses in the country.
Oh.
There's actually a website called the Villisca Axe Murder House where you can actually do day tours there.
All right.
And if you're brave enough, you can actually do an overnight stay.
Oh no.
So
no.
Yeah, so like it'll cost you like over $400. I think it said that
definitely
you can do an overnight stay in there. But some of the tours apparently have been cut short by people hearing children's voices, falling lamps, moving ladders, and flying objects. And actually, in 2014, a paranormal investigator stabbed himself after spending the night there.
Stabbed himself?
Yeah, apparently.
Oh my God.
And it's also believed that a lot of like people that are quite sceptical about this sort of stuff have went and they've actually left being total believers.
Okay, I'm not going there.
So, and I was actually seeing a picture because I went onto the website just to have a little look.
Yeah.
It's like, oh right, I see what. And I was thinking, because obviously like now with all the whole COVID thing, you probably wouldn't be able to go, but right enough, you can't. I don't think you can. I'm not sure you can do the overnight stays, but you can certainly do the day trips.
Right.
Where you can go for a wee trip around the house and stuff. So, although I like, if they say it's haunted, I would have loved to have been able to tell you what happened to them. Because if it's haunted, then you know.
Yeah, like they could have said to the investigator.
I was actually like communicating with them and maybe say if it truly is haunted. Because I mean, I'm a bit of a. I like to believe in that sort of stuff, as I've always said, but I'm still not, because I've not experienced anything myself.
Yeah, I'm the same.
I'm still not like 100% sure on if there is anything, but I certainly would have thought that. If they're claiming it to be haunted, then surely a paranormal investigator would go and investigate.
Yeah, but maybe they can't communicate like that.
True, but then if they were but then to be fair, if they were actually asleep, then maybe
they wouldn't be able to tell you anything.
They wouldn't know who it was anyway. So let's be honest, so maybe not.
Yeah, and just because it's haunted doesn't mean to say they can come through and tell you exactly what happened to them.
Well, I know,
they might just be able to move things or make noises to say they're there.
That's true, yeah. So if anybody's ever visiting Iowa and is interested in a wee...
Or if anybody's been...
I mean, I would love to know if anybody's actually been here.
And if they've had any experiences, that would be well cool.
Or if you live there or plan to go there, take a trip.
Let us know.
Yeah, take a trip and let us know. Obviously, at the moment, it's a bit restricted because of COVID.
Yeah.
But you can still go, I believe. And
it's very unlikely that we are ever going to go. Well, for me, 1,000,000%, I'm never going to go.
Well, Iowa's not somewhere I've ever thought I would probably go.
If you're going to go to America, you're going to go to Florida. Let's face it.
Although I would love to go to San Francisco.
There's lots of places I would like to go to. And that house is not one of the places I would like to go.
No, definitely not.
I don't do haunted.
No, well, no. I don't know if I'd be brave enough. I probably wouldn't out.
No, I wouldn't. Yeah. I wouldn't be brave enough.
No, definitely not. So that is my sort of ghost related story.
Well,
I mean, I know that the crime itself wasn't ghostly, but
okay, I'll set you another challenge instead, right? What? So how about you find, instead of like a ghost story, find like a haunted house, but that's obviously like had murders in it. See if you could find that. Like, so actually,
that's technically what that is.
Oh yeah, but I mean, like, I've heard of other places that maybe a few different things have happened, and
right, okay. Well, I'll try. Well, it'll probably be a few weeks because I don't do ghost stories all the time.
Your next episode is going to be a Patreon anyway.
Is it?
Yeah, so there's no point in doing.
No, I can't do a ghost story
on the Patreon because we want everybody to hear.
Yes, exactly, totally. But so thanks for listening to my crime ghost story ish.
Yeah, thanks for telling us a story that we don't know the answer to.
Yes, because that is it. Because it's ghostly. It's unsolved.
And you've drawn a picture of a ghost.
Oh yeah, I did put a ghost up the bottom of it going boo.
I was going to say, was that actually you or was that your daughter?
No, that was actually me.
So you're just as bad as her then. Yeah. That's where she gets it from.
I'm just as childish as she is, to be honest. But never mind. But anyway, thanks for listening.
Yeah, and if you'd like to follow us on social media, on Instagram and Twitter, we are
crime_divers_pod.
We have a Facebook page,
Crime Divers Podcast.
You can email us at
crime_divers_pod@outlook.com.
We've got a YouTube channel,
Crime Divers Podcast.
If you would like to support us on Patreon, for as little as £1 a month, you can get ad-free episodes, and that's the lowest tier. And then obviously, we have other tiers as well where you get bonus episodes and stuff. And I've just set up TikTok, and I have no idea what the username is. Well, it'll be something to do with Crime Divers.
Just search Crime Divers and it comes up. Yeah. And also, if you do like the show and you do want to keep listening, please don't forget to subscribe,
rate, review.
Thanks for listening.